Well, thank you, Anna, so much for coming on Just Mental. I'm excited for our chat today. I'm excited for people to hear this. So if you're ready, we can dive right in and get started.
Yeah, let's do it.
Awesome. So why don't you start by just introducing yourself, telling the listeners a little bit about who you are, what you do, all that fantastic stuff.
Yeah, awesome. So my name is Anna T. Brooks. I'm a soul purpose activator. So I specialize in working with women who are kind of purpose driven, really seeking to fulfill their purpose in the world and maybe haven't found it at this stage, and helping them to sort of align, I guess, energetically with what they actually want to bring out into the world. If they've been in a career that maybe hasn't really fulfilled them, or they found themselves spending their whole lives kind of working for someone else or achieving goals for seemingly someone else. And they really feel like there's something more to them and there's something more that they want from this life. And so we work with them in a sort of coaching aspect and an energetic aspect as well, to align them and to really figure out what is their ideal lifestyle. How do they get to go through that, and how do they get to set their lives up in that way? So yeah, it's a lot of fun. I'm working with a lot more men at the moment as well, which has been really interesting because that it plays more into that sort of masculine feminine dynamics that I work with a lot as well.
Awesome. So who is Anna Brooks? How did you grow up? Was there an experience in your childhood that kind of pushed you into this career path?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's like anyone, there's obviously so many different aspects, and it's a long, long story over a long time. But I've always been fascinated with people. I've been fascinated with how their minds tick. And I was always that person, I guess, growing up that everyone would come to for advice. It just seemed like I had the answers. It just seemed like I knew how to get them out of the shit they got themselves into. And it just kind of escalated from there. I was fascinated in psychology. I also had a very interesting relationship with my father growing up. He was abusive to my mum. He wasn't ever abusive to me, but he was very estranged and very difficult to be around because he was going through his own challenges with depression. And that shaped who I am in a big way, because I really had to learn how to always be on alert, always be watching out for how his mood swings, how's he feeling, what's going on with him, so that I knew how to adjust myself. And that unfortunately spiraled into a long time of basically going through my life trying to be everything for everybody else, because I was so used to picking up on everybody else's cues, what they were wanting, what they were needing, and completely stopped listening to myself and what I actually need. And that was a big kind of part of my journey. Is while I was fascinated with other people, I was also fascinated with myself and how I had turned into this really overly masculinized, overly kind of hustle culture type person, because I just wanted to prove myself, I guess, to everybody. And it wasn't until I started to kind of look into that and get support and get coaching through that, especially after my father chose to end his life just before my 30th birthday. And that was a huge trigger for me at the time that, okay, this needs to change, because there's something here I'm not dealing with. There's something here I'm not facing. And yeah, and that spiraled kind of everything into finally tapping into myself, tapping into who I am, reconnecting with my femininity, reconnecting with my creativity and just love for life, and being able to be receptive again rather than just the push, push, push kind of hustle type person, and to actually be able to accept support and accept all the things that wanted to come to me, but I was blocking them. And yeah, that it's been kind of that sort of dance from then of finding that balance between the two. And that's what I love, obviously, now with how I work with my clients. It's the same thing. It's helping them find what's your balance, because everybody has a different dynamic. Some people are going to be naturally more masculine or naturally more feminine, but it's about finding where does it sit right with you, so that you can actually live your most authentic life.
First of all, I'm sorry to hear that you lost your dad. Um,
Thank you.
Second of all, I do want to talk. Energy has always been a very interesting conversation to me. I don't feel like I know a lot about it. but I also feel like
Mm.
I've been seeing it increasingly more on platforms like TikTok and Instagram. So why don't we start at
Mm.
the very basic level? What is feminine and masculine energy?
Yeah, absolutely. So masculine energy is the driving force. So that's the things that make you get up and go. It is the drive, it is the motivation, it's the doing basically. It's when you set a goal and you're like, okay, what am I going to do to get the goal? That is the masculine energy. It's acting, it's physical, it's taking action. The feminine energy is more receptive. So rather than pushing, it's the pulling, it's the receiving, it's being creative. It's allowing your body and your mind and your soul to be open to what's going on and allowing yourself to receive. So when you're in the masculine energy, it's very difficult to receive because you are literally the one pushing, you are the one doing, you are the one giving, so to speak. And so naturally, men will tend to focus more on the masculine energy and females on the feminine energy more so, usually. But again, based on how we've been brought up, this can be very, very out of whack. And especially with kind of the hustle culture that's been going on for the last, 20, 30, 40 years, because it was mostly driven by figures in popular kind of culture in like the personal development world, names like Zig Ziglar, Jim Rohn, Tony Robbins. People know these names. These are the sort of people that we've turned to for decades for, I guess, it was personal development and how to, achieve what we want in life. And they are all very masculine driven. It's all about the goals. It's all about the doing and how to take the action. And unfortunately, because that was the only role models we had, the females that also wanted to get ahead in life had to fall in line with that same method. And that sparked that whole generation of people that are just burning themselves out because they're not actually able to do what they want. They're just trying to follow this trend, basically. And it's only been in the last maybe, I'd say, 10 or so years that there's been a bit of a shift now and a bit of a rebound where there are role models coming forward in that more feminine energy, which is more about allowing their creativity to lead, allowing their intuition to lead. So really not just doing things for the sake of doing them, but understanding this is the right thing to do and taking that time to be actually in the moment and to understand what's coming through. And there's kind of been that almost rebound to the other side where there's now, I'm seeing a lot of like clients that I've had have gone way too far into their feminine energy where they're no longer doing anything. They have no motivation. They're kind of that, when the magic came out and it was all about ask, believe, receive. So it's like sit on the couch, come up with your goal, ask for it, and then just sit there and wait for it to happen. And it doesn't work that way. And so it kind of went a little bit too far to the other end with everybody jumping too much into the feminine energy and just expecting things to happen to them. And it kind of went almost into the laziness side of things. And I feel like now is a really good time that we get to rebalance that and kind of find that middle ground again between the masculine, between the doing and the taking action, and then the feminine of actually being receptive, trusting your intuition, and letting your soul, letting the universe guide you as well.
What is the implication or the impact of being unbalanced in your energies? Like, obviously, I'm assuming it's kind of like this sliding scale of sorts where some people may lean more to the masculine, some may lean more to the feminine. But what is the impact of not being overall balanced in a way that's right for you?
Yeah. So depending which end of the scale you're sitting on, if it's the highly masculine, that's when it starts to lead to toxic masculinity, which you might have heard of. And it's basically, it just means where someone is just so far into the acting and the doing that they are completely out of tune with themselves. This is where burnout happens. This is where like overworking happens. This is where relationships shut down because the person's no longer able to actually communicate and able to actually take into account anybody else in their lives. It's when the body shuts down as well. Like signs of burnout are physical as well. People will have mental breakdowns. People will have physical breakdowns as well. Their immune system is absolutely shot because they are in such a highly stressed, highly agitated state as well. So yeah, it's mental, emotional, spiritual, it's physical, it's everything, that those signs of burnout when it's just way too much about the doing and the pushing and how much more can I do and how much harder can I push myself, versus when you've got the other end of the scale where someone has fallen way too deeply into their feminine and they're unmotivated. They're, what you would, I guess, typically call lazy in many ways, but it's not a laziness of just, I don't want to do something. It's almost like a loss of soul, a loss of that inner kind of wanting to proceed with life. It's kind of like a loss of motivation to be a part of life, and it's a detachment. It's so much undoing. There's no doing at all. It's just kind of sitting around waiting for something to happen, or going way too deep in just, all I do all day is I meditate and I journal and I do all of the inner work, but I never actually take any action in my life. And those people are usually very frustrated because of that, because they're like, well, I'm doing all of this work, I'm doing all of this manifestation work, for example, but nothing's happening. And it's like, well, yeah, because you're not actually moving forward. Like, you're doing the journaling's telling you, and your meditation is telling you, go do this, go for a walk, go to this restaurant, go talk to this person. And you're like, oh, thanks for the message. Okay, back to what I was doing. Like, you're not actually taking the action that the feminine is trying to inspire you to do. So it becomes a very unmotivated, very kind of, yeah, very, very depressing state to be in after a while.
I think part of it too is there's so many mixed messages. You talk about these masculine kind of role models in the media, and I think there's a lot of role models, maybe I shouldn't use the word role models, but a lot of people in the social media space that are promoting this idea that if you put out good things into the universe, then eventually it will come back to you. And I do believe that things happen for a reason and they happen to you based on what you're able to put out. But I think it can also be misconstrued to the fact that things will just fall in your lap if you continue to be a good person and all of that stuff. And I think that's what you're getting at, is that there needs to be both this understanding that it should happen to you, but that's based on the perception that you've put in the work to achieve that.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. And that's also the difference, I think, between understanding what is it that, yeah, put out good things into the world versus self-sacrifice for the good of everybody else. And that's kind of that fine line that most people miss. They don't understand that actually being selfish in the sense of putting yourself first and your desires and your wants is going to help everybody else. Because if you think of, like, a glass of water, for example, if your energy, your life stamina is, a glass of water, if it is half empty or if it's fully empty because you're overgiving to everybody else, you literally have nothing of substance left. There is nothing left of you. Whatever you're giving to others is crumbs. Versus if you actually focus on filling your cup so that it's like full, it's overflowing, you're serving yourself, you're helping yourself, then all of the stuff that's overflowing is just abundance. It's even better. It's your most potent high energy. And that's what you're giving to other people. That's what they're receiving. You're actually helping them more. But most people will get into that kind of habit of, yeah, like, if I put out good into the world, if I just please everybody else, if I just do all the things that others want me to do, then I'll be good and I'll get rewarded, when actually you just become a doormat and people just get used to taking from you because they're used to you saying, basically, I'm not important, take everything from me, I come last, I don't matter. And that's exactly the pattern that you're actually starting in your life, rather than actually attracting anything good back to you, because it's not coming from a place of abundance. It's coming from a place of scarcity and need and please like me, please want me, all that kind of thing.
What would it look like to, like, how does it manifest when you are balanced in your masculine and your feminine energy?
Good question. And I feel like I'm good at I'm good to answer that now, because I actually have got that balance. It looks like being able to trust your feminine energy to guide you, to inspire you, to know when to pull back, when it's time to when you've been maybe going really, really hard at something for quite a while and you just feel like, you know what, I need to take a step back. I need to just release. There's a bit too much pent up energy here, and knowing when that time is for yourself. So when to push forward, when to discipline yourself, when to say, yep, you know what, now is the time to like nose to the grindstone. Let's do this. Let's hustle. Let's make this happen. And when to know to pull back and go, now's the time to rest. Now's the time to rejuvenate, to let the universe do its part as well, so that I'm actually co-creating. I'm not just trying to push this big boulder up the hill on my own. How about I let somebody else also help me here? And that's what it looks like. It looks like focus and flow. So it's like, now I'm focused. Now I'm focused on this thing. Now I'm doing this thing. And now I'm stepping back into flow. I'm just going to see where the next step is before I keep pushing and pushing and pushing, because then often that focus will become force. And that's when you're, completely getting nowhere, because it's like, banging your head up against a wall. It's not going to serve anyone. You're taking action and you're doing it with a lot of energy, but it's not getting you anywhere. So that's that magical kind of balance between focus and flow, so that the focus doesn't become force, and so that flow doesn't become depression and laziness. It's that middle ground there.
I think I love that you brought up this concept of filling your own cup before you go looking to fill others. Because when you think hustle culture, and I'm going to ask you in a second what that word kind of means to you, but rest is often undervalued, underappreciated, and thrown to the side as if it's not important. But you have to rest and recover in order to be your best self. And if you want to be successful, you have to be performing at the top of who you are. And I think oftentimes we lose this concept of rest in this idea that if you're not constantly going 100 miles an hour, then you're not successful. But at what point does that run you completely dry? Like kind of like a car running out of gas. At what point are you going to not be able to go anymore?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely agree with that.
So I'll go back to that question, hustle culture. When you first think of that word, what comes to mind? How does it make you feel?
Well, it doesn't make me feel anything personally anymore, because I'm so aware of it. I've been through it. I'm so in it every single day with so many of my clients and everything. But it definitely just brings to mind the stress, the constant pressure, the pressure to perform, and it's that kind of feeling of just overwhelm where everything is just a little bit too much, and yet you just keep piling more on your plate. That's like when I think of hustle culture, that's exactly how I see that person. Is they have filled themselves and their life to the brim with everything they can possibly fit in, and then they just keep adding to it. And then it's, let's decrease the hours I'm sleeping. Oh, that's okay. I'll take on, good old Arnie's slogan from years ago. I'll sleep when I'm dead. All that kind of stuff. Like these little, lines and everything become someone's actual motto in life. And it's really depressing to see, because you see that person and you can literally feel their soul being sucked away, and that they're dead on the inside now. And you can feel that just being around them. You can feel the way that they're speaking, that they just don't have that joy and that zest in their life. Everything is structured. Everything is pre-planned. Everything, like a conversation with them, just feels like they're literally just sprouting everything that they've already pre-programmed in their minds. And yeah, and it's difficult to be around, except if you're also in that hustle culture, then it just feeds, right? It's that what do they call it? Like an echo chamber. When you surround yourself by just people that are exactly like you, well, of course, they're just going to be like, yeah, awesome. Yeah, I only sleep 4 hours a day now too. Yeah, woohoo. And you kind of just get that, validation over and over and over, which just fuels that culture even more, because you're obviously going to find more people who are in that. And at no point do you get a rest to actually pull back and go, hold on, is anyone here actually healthy? Does anyone here actually have a functional relationship in their life? Not even with a significant other, but like even with their family or a friend. Like, do they actually have anyone that they can sit down with and have a real conversation? Probably not, because everyone in their life is the same. It's like, what do we want to do? How do we do it? Let's do it. You are just transactional to me. I don't want to have a conversation unless I can get something out of it. Otherwise, it's a waste of time. And that's their relationships. They're all transactional. So, yeah, it's an intense culture. It's an intense kind of space to be in for sure.
It almost gives me like this perception of the Wolf on Wall Street kind of vibes, where you have
Yeah.
all of these men and they didn't sleep. They didn't really eat healthy. Their only goal in life was to be as rich as possible. And at what cost? Everything in life worth having comes at a cost. And I think until you realize that, you're going to be stuck in this cycle of continually chasing things that maybe don't bring you the kind of joy that you think they're going to bring you.
Yeah, 100%. And like, it's funny you brought up that movie, the story, because literally that's one of the examples that I think of when I think of how this has affected especially females, because in that movie they portray, there's a woman, I don't know the character's name now, but she's in like the team that is working with Jordan Belfort, and she is basically like the top saleswoman in there. And they have this whole scene about her where, he's talking about how she started and she has children and she had, no money, and he taught her into, how to sell all this stuff. And now she's, loaded and all this kind of stuff. And it cuts to her and she's so part of the culture. There is not a shred of femininity left in her. She is just all hard, all like solid, nothing, no softness whatsoever. And that is in the movie obviously portrayed as like the way to be. And once again, it shows exactly what it was like back in the 80s for females trying to get into the corporate space. It's either become like the men or you're shut out. You have no other way of being able to, there's no other leadership showing except that. And then in movies like that, it glorifies it even further of like, well, yeah, if you want to succeed, just you got to get really hard. You got to get really masculine. You got to get into that hustle culture. You can't be in your feminine energy at all. You've just got to basically become the doer, and that's it. And and it's scary to watch that, because people, for years did kind of watch all of that and take that on as the ideal role model for, what they should be when they grow up. Well, maybe I need to be like that. Maybe I need to be more cutthroat. Maybe I need to be more closed off and just hard and everything like that. So very, very interesting, that whole story.
What is the impact, like the mental and emotional impact of constantly being in your masculine?
It's intense. It's a lot of, it's just draining. That's 100% the biggest thing that happens in that space is burnout. And that's people having total breakdowns, people having their bodies breaking down, different illnesses that can form from that, because they are just not listening to their bodies. They're not listening to themselves. They have no feminine receptivity. So they don't look for the cues. They don't look when they're tired. They just take that as a sign of, well, I just got to go harder. I just got to have more coffee. And it's like, no, you actually need to rest. Your body is actually running on nothing but adrenaline right now. And this is not good. It has to rebalance. And our bodies are fantastic at rebalancing us to the best of their ability. Like, that's literally their job. Our body's job is to keep us alive. So it will do anything and everything to combat whatever shit you're giving it to be able to be able to live. And it will do that up until a point where it just can't anymore. And that's when illness and like disease form, and people think that it just happened out of nowhere. It's like, it didn't happen out of nowhere. It happened because your body for so long was trying to manage all of the crap that you're throwing at it, all of the lack of sleep, all of the excess caffeine, all of the stress, all of everything that you've been putting into it. And now it's reached that point where it's like, I can't. I've done everything I can to mitigate what you've put into me, and I've reached the brink. And that's when the disease and the illnesses form and show themselves up. And it seems so sudden, but it never is. It's always the body just doing the best that it can until it can't.
I think that brings up an interesting point, that there's a quote, I don't know necessarily who said it, but they said, if you don't give your body a break, your body will take the break when you least expect it, or when you feel like you need it the least. And I think it's a very important reminder that, again, if you continue to go at a pace that you're going at and you refuse to allow yourself to rest, that eventually you will burn yourself into the ground. And it's going to be a lot worse then than what it would have been if you would have just taken the steps earlier to make sure that that didn't happen in the first place.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's an interesting kind of concept as well, with where people think of self-care. So even if they are starting to think like, oh, maybe I am, burning myself out a little bit more, too much, or maybe I should start looking at self-care a little bit. And what they actually incorporate instead is something I call aftercare. So it's like, oh, well, when I, at the end of this really, really stressful week, when everything's like I've got so much going on, and then I'm just going to like go out for a meal, I'm going to have a few glasses of wine, and I'm going to have a big nap, and I'm going to like do some candles and have a bath or something. And they think that that's self-care. That is aftercare. That's like you have put yourself through all of the stress, and now you're trying to rebound it by doing that. And that has a time and a place, of course, but that's not a life strategy. And that's how most people treat it, is if I go hard enough, then I will do this thing to try and combat it, to calm down. Self-care is actually incorporating ways to rejuvenate and to replenish yourself on a daily basis. It means like throughout the day, I will do some breath work. I will do some meditation. I will go for that walk. I will get that sunshine. I will get that movement in my body. I will go and have a conversation with someone I love. That is self-care, actually incorporating it on a day-to-day basis, so that you're never getting yourself to the stage where it's like, okay, well, now I'm just so hyped up and I'm so stressed and everything like that. Okay, now I'm just going to relax for like the next few hours. That's not a balanced life. That's literally just going from one end to the other over and over. And at no point does your body just get to actually balance and be in a like healthy state. It's always in some sort of like ridiculous excess, basically.
I think it's interesting that you say that, because when we look at like health and wellness as a whole, a lot of the times the way that we deal with health specifically is by putting a band-aid on a much deeper issue. And when I think about what you just said, the rest at the end of a very stressful week is the band-aid on a much deeper issue. And instead of treating or going to the root cause of what that could potentially be, we're just throwing a quick fix, or what we think is a quick fix, on the problem without understanding or realizing what the long-term impact of that could be.
Yeah, absolutely. And our health system obviously has a lot to do with that, because most people are still very programmed into the old school, like if something's wrong, go see the doctor. And the problem is that our doctors are not the same as they used to be hundreds or like 20, 30, 40 years ago. They are now basically just, trained and educated by the pharmaceutical companies. So they are under so much stress and under so much pressure to, get through everybody, because the healthcare system is struggling more and more and more. They don't have the time to be able to actually have this kind of conversation and go, let's talk about your lifestyle. Let's talk about all these different ways that we can support you, that you can actually start shifting into more self-care. Of course, they don't have the time for that. They don't have the expertise in that. And often they're also part of their own hustle culture within that kind of realm. And so, of course, prescribing a drug, the Band-Aid, is the easiest solution, because then they've done their thing and they get to send someone off. And yeah, and it's hard, because then, as we know, with anything we implement into our body, there's always going to be then further side effects, further things that will stem from that. So it's like, well, this might calm me down, but then what else is it stirring up in me? What else is it creating inside of me that I'm then going to have to deal with as well? And it's not actually, like you said, getting to the root cause.
It feels like we've kind of lost that holistic approach to the way that we look at health and well-being, because again, like I said, and like you just reiterated, a lot of the times we're just looking for, and that feeds into hustle culture as well. We don't have time. We don't have time to go to the doctor. We don't have time to take a nap. We don't have time to do any of these little self-care things. But I think a lot of people who are younger are the ones that are suffering now or later, because they have fed into this culture for so long that, sure, when you're 22 years old, the effects of that are not going to be as great as when you're 50, 60, even 70.
Yeah. And it's hard to think that far ahead as well. Like, I know when I was younger, when I was a teenager, I literally thought 30 was like death. I'm like, I'm sure that I'll be dead by 30. I don't think there's anything to do after 30. Like, that was the end of the road for me. So, like, I get it. It's hard to kind of forecast your future and actually see the reality of it until you get there. And I know, like, back then as well, I didn't have the greatest role models for people that have, that are in their 30s or 40s or 50s. I did see people that seemed very depleted in life, very negative, very tired, very unwell. So, of course, that's how my mind kind of correlated. Well, okay, so obviously this must be just something that happens when you hit 30, like it just all goes downhill. And that changed for me, obviously, being in the online space and in the coaching space and meeting different people and traveling and realizing that, okay, well, my little bubble wasn't actually reflective of the truth. It was just one particular perspective, one particular kind of really nuanced view on things. Um, and then, that's when it gets to kind of shift and you get to see things a little bit differently. But yeah, I think if we had the ability, and we do have the ability, to show younger people like forecasting for their lives of, this is how this is going to impact you in the future, this is how this is going to impact you in the future, um, that would help a lot. That would help a lot. And especially, getting people out of, because the hustle culture is all about the now. It's all about what are you doing right now, right this second. Can you do more in this very moment? Can you, stretch your time out even further in this moment? And it's just breaking that pattern for even a moment to go, hold on, okay, let's just think, if you're like this in 10 years, what are you going to look like? What are you going to feel like? Like, let's just take you out of this really pressurized pressure cooker of a moment that you're in right now and just think about that. And that's usually enough just to break someone out of it, even just for a moment, because then they take a moment to check in and be like, holy shit, if I have to operate at this level for another 10 years, like, I'll be dead. And it's like, yeah, you will. Exactly. We got there. And they get it. They get it.
I love that you brought up the fact that when you were younger, you looked at 30 like this impossible age to get to. And I think that's another issue is when we're young, we have this idea that we're invincible and nothing could possibly happen to us. And like we can afford to do these things because we have our health and we have our wellness. But again, everything kind of comes at a cost. And like you said, if we can open this conversation of a larger dialogue surrounding the effects of what you're doing now potentially on your future, then I think that can really change the conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a big thing. Like, I haven't worked with a lot of like children and sort of younger demographics and everything. Um, it is mostly kind of, yeah, young adults that sort of start coming to me, and then also, people all the way into their 60s and 70s as well. But definitely from that younger demographic, it's they're drawn to me because they think I'm younger than I am, for starters. So they think, okay, awesome, like she's my age, and then I tell them I'm like a decade older, and they get confused. But they get confused for a good reason, because they're similar to me, where they thought, oh, like, once you hit over 30, like you must be, on your way out of life, basically. And then they meet me and they're like, oh, okay, well, I thought you were younger, and I thought, we were on the same kind of page and everything like that. So this is why I got inspired. And then they get to kind of shift their own perspective of how they see things, of like, okay, this isn't an age thing. This is actually a lifestyle thing. This is years and years and years of putting myself first, of focusing on my health, of focusing on my wellness, on focusing on my spirituality, on my emotional health, on actually treating myself well, on teaching others how to treat me well. It's like a whole big, snowball. But it's years and years and years in the making. It's not something that, yeah, I wasn't this person when I was 20. I was a very different person, but it builds on itself. And I think when they get to see that, and they get to see someone that they, would otherwise have considered like, okay, well, that's when I thought I'd be done with life. And they're like, oh, okay, you actually have energy. You actually have spark. How did you do that? Like, how did you maintain that and continue to grow that? And that's a really, I think, important conversation, because again, it comes down to your energy, like right back to the start, right? It comes back to your energy. that the way that you're operating in life, the way that you are holding yourself through life, impacts your energy, which impacts your body, which impacts the way you look, which impacts the way that you show up and the way that people receive you. So if you can, if we can get that across to more and more people, then that's perfect. Like, that's going to help them to focus on themselves a little bit more and stop outsourcing all of their happiness to everything outside of them that wants them to, succeed on whatever terms somebody else has basically outlined for them.
I love that. Without obviously going into too much detail, you mentioned that you work with some people who are 60, 70 years old. Is there a common kind of resurgence of regret amongst this age of people, things that they wish they would have done differently with their life?
Not with the people I work with, just because of my specific niche. It is always people that have been very purpose driven, very soul seeking their whole lives, even if they didn't know it. So even at that age, they're still feeling like they have more to give. And I think as well, I attract a lot of people who, through their lives, they have learned a lot of lessons. And part of that is understanding that what you've been through for a reason, and that your life just gets to continue exactly from where it is now. You don't get to go back regardless. So for me, I haven't had, clients in that space at all, which is lovely. But I am aware of it. I've, definitely been aware of it in my peripheral for quite a while, that is what happens. That is what happens when exactly what we're talking about now doesn't get dealt with for most of their lives. And then that's exactly where they end up, is, they're regretful that, I wish I'd actually done what I wanted to do. I wish I'd actually gone and taken that chance on that business or that job or that relationship that I talked myself out of because of this and this and this. That's exactly what happens. But the joyful thing about that is you can do that at any point. It doesn't matter what age you are. If you decide in that moment that you're like, you know what, now I'm no longer holding myself back. Now I'm actually going to do what I want. You can do it. There's absolutely no reason for it. I come from a personal training background as well. So before I was coaching, my previous life, I was a personal trainer for 10 years. And so in that space, I worked with a lot of people who were, in their 60s and 70s. And it was absolutely fantastic to watch how they transformed, how, they hadn't been really focusing on their health for most of their life. Like, they weren't, by any means, I wasn't working with people who were absolutely, completely kind of off the charts, but people who, just hadn't prioritized it previously. And they got to finally put themselves first. They got to put, their health and their eating and their nutrition and their training and everything first. And they absolutely flourished, and their whole lives got to expand and get better from that. They got more active, they got more confident, they got better relationships, all of this stuff. So that's the thing, like, I want people to understand, is that it's not actually an age thing, it's an attitude thing. And you can decide today is that day when things are going to be different. And yes, you can continue to sit there and look back on your life and go, oh, I wish I'd done this sooner. I wish I'd done this 10 years earlier, 20 years earlier, 40 years earlier. Sure, you can go down that road, but it's not actually going to get you anywhere. What you can do is say, from now on, from today, things are going to be a little bit different. I'm going to actually focus on myself. And, from my experience, I can definitely say it makes a massive difference. It doesn't matter what age the person is. And at the end of the day, if you're happy in this moment, what does the past matter anyway? Like, that's just memories of stuff. And we actually need to live like now.
I love that. I think that's a great reminder, because especially with the rise of mental health conditions, anxiety, depression, depression is the obsession. I shouldn't say obsession, but this idea that we have regrets about the past. And then anxiety is this fear about the future that we have that may or may not be validated by previous or current experiences. So I think that's a great reminder that, again, what we're guaranteed is what we have right now. And that's the most important part of living each and every day.
Yeah, absolutely. And any healing, any kind of yeah, any healing that needs to be done around our past or around our fears of our future or anything like that, it needs to be done in the now anyway. You can't forecast that, oh yeah, I'm going to fix this in 10 years' time. You might not be here. And you can't go back and go, well, I'm going to go and make a different decision 10 years ago and therefore not be here. You can't do that either. The only time that you can heal is now. And, you know, not to get too kind of quantum and too kind of on the whole time aspect, but we can heal generational, we can heal years and years and years and decades of trauma in the now. So I, by working on myself, therefore heal the trauma from my mother, from my grandmother, from my great grandmother, because at the end, time is just a construct that we have here on earth. It's something that we've created to make our lives as humans easier because our human bodies do have a shelf life. But it's not actually a construct that exists. Everything is always happening in the now. So if I'm healing this now, I am healing the pain that was in the past. And I often refer to this in terms of like what I went through with my dad, because that was a very difficult relationship. And I had a lot of trauma and a lot of pain from him and from the way that I was brought up by him. But now when I look back, I smile. I have so much love for him because the healing work I did now and in the last few years has healed that. It's healed the little inner girl who didn't feel loved, who didn't feel accepted, who felt like she had to prove herself to everybody else. I've gone back and actually healed her because she's still within me. It might have been experiences that happened 10 or 20 years ago, but that girl is still within me. So with me doing that work now, I can completely change my past, so to speak.
I think that's very important. And obviously, looking back on our past with the perception or the idea that doing so is going to help us shape a better future or a better tomorrow for ourselves, for our families, whatever it may be. Now, we talk a lot about self care. You talked a lot about self care. For somebody who maybe doesn't know where to start, where would be a good place to kind of get the ball rolling?
I think great question to ask yourself is, how do I want to feel? Because we don't often ask ourselves that. And I think it's a good time to start in the morning or whenever your day starts. So obviously if you're doing night shift, whatever time, your day starts, but to do it, after waking up and to check in with yourself, how do I want to feel today? And because every single person is so individual in terms of what will work for you, in terms of, do you need to do something more active? Do you need to do something more passive? What inspires you? But if you tap into how do I want to feel today, that will usually give you an indication of what you need to do. Whether it's like, okay, well, I want to feel like for today, for example, I had coaching session in the morning, then I've got this podcast with you, and then got a whole bunch of other stuff lined up. So I'm like, okay, how do I want to feel this morning? I want to feel energized. I want to feel focused. I want to feel like I'm really clear. So what do I need to do to set myself up for that? Okay, well, I'm going to need to move my body. I need to get some things moving through so that I'm actually awake. I need to go take a few minutes just to meditate, just to tune in, to trust that everything that's going to come through is what's meant to come through. Whatever else, right, that comes to me. But I know how I want to feel. And therefore I go, well, what do I need to do in order to do that? And that's that masculine and feminine flowing together. The feminine being the receptivity, the asking of how do I want to feel? And then once you have that, the feminine has answered and the masculine gets to come in and go, okay, cool. So what you're going to do is you're going to do this, you're going to do this, and you're going to do this. And that's going to help you to get there. And that is the masculine's job, is to actually follow through with what the feminine wants. But if you start with the masculine, if you don't actually ask the feminine what she wants, then all you end up is with a bunch of doing stuff. And that's, what you see people often do with like morning routines or anything like that. They just see some kind of routine online, or they watch it on YouTube, they see it on TikTok, whatever. And they're like, oh, I'm just going to follow this person's morning routine. Like, that's not going to work. That person's morning routine works for them because they know how they want to feel. They know what they want out of it, and they're doing what's aligned for them. You don't know that person. You don't know that person's energy. Why in the world would you think that their morning routine is going to work for you? And sometimes we can take inspiration and we can, there'll be things that resonate, which is awesome. But for the most part, it needs to be individual. It needs to be unique and personalized. and it's going to be different every day. That's the other thing to keep in mind, because today that's how I wanted to feel. Tomorrow I have a day off and it's my day to spend with my husband and to just be together and be really present. So no, I don't need to wake up feeling really energized and really focused and all of that. I need to be more in a like a romantic mood. I need to be in more of a receptive mood. And there's going to be different things that I do to put myself into that sort of feeling.
I think that is perfectly said, because social media as a whole convinces us that we need things just because someone else has them. And obviously, like you said it perfectly. Self-care is personal. It's self-care, meaning it works for you and it might not work for someone else. And so it's almost like this journey that we have to take with figuring out how that's going to work and what those things are that we need to be doing. Um, as a final question, I always like to ask people, and you can go into as much detail as you want, but knowing the impact that our childhood has on us, if you could go back to your younger self at whatever stage in life and you could speak to her, what would you say?
That is a really good question. And I think because of the work that I've done, I would say nothing, because I know my journey and I know the reason for it. There's a time in my life where I might have said, please know that you are enough, that you don't need to prove yourself to anybody else. But the truth is that that little girl needed to feel that. She needed to go through that to become who I am today. And I think if you are truly at peace and fulfilled with who you are in the moment, you would not go back and change a thing. And that's a hard thing, especially when we've been through trauma, especially when we've been through situations that have changed us, really profoundly. Things like the death of my dad and that kind of thing. I would not take a single thing back about that, and I would not want it to happen any different way, because of how it has actually healed me, how it has healed our relationship. Like, I have a relationship with him now in the afterlife that I actually feel more connected with him than I did when he was alive. And I wouldn't change that for anything, because I know that that's actually given me my superpowers in my coaching business as well, in how I relate to people, that I understand them deeper. So I don't know if that's the answer that you typically get, but I wouldn't tell her anything except just do this, just do exactly as you feel best in each moment, because I know that where she ends up is absolutely perfect.
Definitely not a traditional answer, but I love it. I think it's a different perspective on a very complex topic. Like, I don't even know what I would say if I had the opportunity to speak to my younger self. Like you, I also believe that things happen the way that they happen for a very specific reason, and that we're meant to go through what we go through. Granted, I'm not like, there's some things that I don't think a person should ever have to experience, but at the end of the day, our struggle is what makes us us. And that is what makes us unique. And that is ultimately what shapes us. And so I love that answer. Love that.
Awesome. Yay. Well, yeah, thank you so much for having me on. This was really fun. I feel like we covered so many different avenues of like hustle culture and energetics and masculine and feminine dynamics, routines, self-care. Like, yeah, it did so much.
No, it was awesome. And Anna, I really appreciate you taking the time to come on the show today and speak. I know there is a lot of stuff in here that is going to be helpful for one person. And even if this helps one person, that has always been the goal of what this podcast is doing. And I'm confident that this episode will be able to do exactly that.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
One last thing, where can people find you if they wanted to reach out?
Oh yeah, so I think you're going to pop some links in, like with the podcast there. So my milkshake website is the easiest way, just to kind of see all the links for free trainings, free programs, as well as my paid offers, and join my Facebook group, which is really fun. We do a lot of like free coaching and like oracle card readings and that kind of thing in there as well. So yeah, lots of ways, yeah, to connect that way. But yeah, Facebook's probably the easiest place to find me because my profile's public. If you just look up Anna T. Brooks, and yeah, and then we can connect from there.
Awesome. That sounds amazing. Well, Anna, thank you again, and I wish you all the best in whatever it is that you do next.
Thank you so much.
Have a great day.